Hawah!
Shalom, Yapa, Wapa, people. Thank you for being here once again. Very excited about this video. Today we'll be talking about the Pyramid of Cholula. Yes, the Pyramid of Cholula in Mexico. In case you don't know, well, you're gonna know after this video is over, what is the significance of this pyramid, how far back it goes, what have scholars said about this, what is the information that exists about this place, and the legends, the mythos. All right, so I hope you like this video. We're gonna get right into it. Again, we're talking about the Pyramid of Cholula. All right, what does this have to do with the Tower of Babel, the Tower of Belus, or the Temple of Jupiter Belus? All right, what does it have to do with that? All right, let's see. All right, so we begin with this book. It's called The North Americans of Antiquity, Their Origin, Migrations, and Type of Civilization Considered by John T. Short. Third edition says, written in 1882, has a picture here of Palenque on the left. All right, so we go to this part of the book. Page 235 says, Cholula, the Mexican Babel. All right, and it starts situated on the coast, a short distance below Veracruz. The entire region bore the name of Anahuac Chicalanco. The first great exploit of the Olmec chiefs, the destruction of the giants. So the Olmecs, in their legends, they defeated giants. It's all over their myths. When they first got to Anahuac, or Mexico, we observe was performed at some distance from their earliest settlement. The state of Puebla, right? This is where Cholula is, right? The state of Puebla became their chosen ground, and quite soon after the above achievement, they undertook the building of the famous Tower of Cholula. Alright, so this author is given credit to the Olmecs for building the Tower of Cholula, the Pyramid of Cholula, which is so closely allied in its traditional history with the Tower of Babel. Again, a different source. We're gonna get different sources throughout this video. He's telling us that this famous Tower of Cholula, this pyramid, which is so closely allied in its traditional history with the Tower of Babel. Several authors state that the erection of the Pyramid of Cholula was done in memory of the erection of the Tower of Babel, at which it is claimed the ancestors of the Olmec chiefs were present. Boturini is probably one of the most sanguine advocates of this view. Others consider that the knowledge which the ancestors of this people transmitted to them with reference to Babel in time became associated with the Cholula edifice and confound with its history.
I want to show you some things that I don't think you even knew existed. It goes against everything Manifest Destiny teaches about Native Americans. And I want you to know this part of our history because people erased it. And we'll get to that later on in the program. Erased it intentionally. Erased it intentionally. That's an important part of it.
We're at the BBC news website, and one of their parts says here, BBC Future, it says the giant pyramid hidden inside a mountain. Alright, a giant pyramid hidden inside a mountain. This temple at Cholula dwarfs the Great Pyramid of Giza. Alright, it dwarfs the Great Pyramid of Giza, yet it went unnoticed by Spanish invaders. Why? By Saria Gorvet. This is back in 2016. It says they arrived in their thousands, hardened by months of war with ferocious natives, near starvation and exotic diseases. Hernan Cortez and his Spanish army marched into the great city of Cholula, expecting a fight. But this was a sacred city. Instead of investing in weapons, its inhabitants built temples. It was said they had a holy pyramid for every day of the year. After such generosity, their gods would surely protect them. This was a grave error indeed. Alright, so they were building temples. They might have had some idols there, right? Praying to their gods, and they was asking them for protection. Alright, and what did that bring? It didn't help them, right? It brought Hernan Cortez, alright, and a Spanish army. So it says this was a grave error indeed. As the army stormed the streets, religious treasures were looted and the precious pyramids went up in smoke. Within 3 hours, they had murdered 3,000 people, 3,000 of your ancestors. October 12, 1519 was a bloodbath on an unprecedented scale, leaving 10% of the city's population dead. Alright, so I already did the genocide and Holocaust videos, but we're gonna keep running into this. Alright. Eventually, the Spaniards settled in Cholula, now part of Mexico, erecting enough of their own buildings that the city is now known for having a church for every day of the year. The final touch, a symbol of their Christian conquest, is the Iglesia de Nuestra Señora de los Remediosa, built on what they thought was a large hill. Did they really think it was a large hill, or were they trying to hide it? And was this really a church, or was this a temple that was already there and they made it into a church? Alright, we're gonna read. Alright. It says the view of the pyramid was taken in the early 20th century, it says here. But not all is as it seems. Beneath the tiny church, hidden under tufts of grass, trees, and soil, is an ancient pyramid of truly gigantic proportions, standing 450 meters wide and 66 meters tall. From end to end, the Great Pyramid of Cholula is equivalent to 9 Olympic-sized swimming pools. Alright? It's equivalent to 9 Olympic-sized swimming pools. So how did these trees and soil get over this whole pyramid? Wouldn't that take a long time? This is ancient. Alright, this pyramid in Cholula is ancient. We're gonna see how ancient. For an obscure temple no one's heard of, Cholula holds an impressive array of records. It's the largest pyramid on the planet. Again, it's the largest pyramid on the planet, with a base 4 times larger than the Great Pyramid of Giza and nearly twice the volume. Never mind the largest pyramid, is the largest monument ever constructed anywhere. Alright? Now think about that and remember this. It's the largest monument ever constructed anywhere by any civilization to this day, my people. Alright? This is in Mexico, America. To locals, it's aptly known as Tlachihualtepelt, man-made mountain. A man-made mountain? Alright, we're going to see the significance in this later on. Thanks to the church on top, it's also the oldest continuously occupied building on the continent. Alright, the oldest continuously occupied building on the continent. The story goes that until the locals began construction of an insane asylum in 1910, nobody knew it was a pyramid. Certainly, by the time Cortez and his men arrived, it was already 1,000 years old and entirely concealed by vegetation. Alright, so supposedly nobody knew. Alright. Early excavations revealed a series of gruesome findings, including the deformed skulls of decapitated children. Where did it come from? And why did it stay hidden for so long? Alright, you can see the image here. Now, despite its enormous size, very little is known about the pyramid's early history. It's thought construction began around 300 BC. They don't know, alright? So if they don't know, how can they tell you how old it is? So if we're telling you it might be a lot older, how can they say it's not if they don't know, alright? So again, it's thought. They don't know. They think construction began around 300 BC. By who exactly remains a mystery. Alright, keyword there, mystery. We've been following along, right? So when it's mystery, that means my story. They're talking about you. Alright? Because when they're talking about his story, they're talking about the invader's story, right? Not the mystery. Everything's a mystery when it comes to you. Alright, that's how this is code words, alright? Again, by who exactly built this, it remains a mystery. According to myth, it was built by a giant. According to myth. Alright, we're gonna get into this myth. A giant, alright? A giant, remember that, alright? Most likely the city's inhabitants, known as the Choluteca, were a cosmopolitan mix. It appears to have been multi-ethnic, with a great deal of migration, says David Carballo, an archaeologist at Boston University, Massachusetts. Whoever they were, they probably had a lot of money. Cholula is conveniently located in the Mexican highlands and was an important trading post for thousands of years, linking the Toltec, Chichimeca kingdoms in the north with the Maya in the south. Cortez called it the most beautiful city outside of Spain. Alright, Cholula was the most beautiful city outside of Spain. By the time he arrived, it was the second largest city in the Aztec Empire, though it had already exchanged hands numerous times. Very important, so it already had been conquered and a lot of different people had settled there, right? So it wasn't the original people. And here there are even more surprises. In fact, it's not one pyramid at all, but a great Russian doll of construction, consisting of no less than 6, one on top of the other. 6, really? Are we missing 2? 2 more stories or 2 more layers? It grew in stages as successive civilizations improved on what had already been built. They made a conscious effort to maintain and in some cases display previous construction episodes. This is pretty novel and shows deliberate efforts to link to the past, says Carballo. Alright, so check out the image. It says the pyramid was built to appease the feathered serpent. God, are we talking about Quetzalcoatl? Are we talking about the Dracan, the dragon? A fiery serpent, a feathered serpent? What are they talking about here, huh? So this pyramid was built to appease the feathered serpent. According to legend, when they heard the conquistadors were coming, The locals covered their precious temple with soil themselves. In fact, it may have happened by accident. That's because, incredibly, the largest pyramid in the world is made of mud. Adobe bricks. All right, so they say mud, but this is not like a dirt mound. All right, so we have adobe bricks. These are bricks. All right, we're gonna see how important this is, right? Because we're gonna see how Herodotus describes the Tower of Babel, which was also built the exact same way, made out of mud, of adobe bricks. All right, I'm gonna show you that. Are made by mixing mud with other materials such as sand or straw and baking it hard in the sun. Important, baking it hard in the sun, all right? To make the pyramid, the outer bricks were smooth, with more earth to create a painted surface. In its prime, the temple was covered in red, black, and yellow insects. Whoa. In dry climates, mud bricks are extremely durable, lasting thousands of years. Again, in dry climates, mud bricks are extremely durable, lasting thousands of years. In humid Mexico, the mud creation was a fertile platform for tropical jungle. It was abandoned sometime in the 7th or 8th century CE. The Choluteca had a newer pyramid temple located nearby, which the Spaniards destroyed, says Carvalho. The pyramid also had topography in its favor. The pyramid rests on a natural platform in an area which is almost completely mountainous. Today, the city has reclaimed their pyramid, which can be explored via over 5 miles of tunnels constructed in the early 20th century. Nearly 500 years after the colonial conquest, the city must contend with a new invasion, tourists. From the book Anacalypsis, an attempt to draw aside the veil of the Sadic Isis, or an inquiry into the origin of languages, nations, and religions, by the late Godfrey Higgins, Esquire. Volume 2, 1836. And we're going to go all the way to chapter 4. And it says, chapter 4 is, says here, Lord Kingsborough on Mexico. Malcolm, Mexican mythos, the same as that of the Old World. Again, Mexican mythos, the same as that of the Old World. Where is the true Old World? Which one is the duplicate? Again, you see, Boturini says, no pagan nation refers primitive events to fixed dates like the Indians, meaning the Americans. They recount to us the history of the creation of the world, of the deluge, of the confusion of tongues at the time of the Tower of Babel, of the other epochs and ages of the world, of their ancestors' long travels in Asia, with the years precisely distinguished by their corresponding characters. Humboldt says that the Mexicans hold that before the flood, which took place 4,800 years after the creation of the world, the earth was inhabited by giants. One of them, after the flood, called the Hawah. So after the flood, there were still giants, just like in the Old Testament, right? King David, Goliath, all right. Or the architect built an immense pyramidal tower. Again, so it says one of them after the flood called Hawah, or the architect, built an immense pyramidal tower, which was to reach to heaven. All right, so what are we starting to talk about here? You know, all right, I guess we're gonna get into the Tower of Babel. We know we're gonna read later on of the wandering masons, the giant wandering masons that build these megalithic ruins all around the world. All right, so this is an example of one here. Hawah, or the architect, built an immense pyramidal tower which was to reach to heaven, but the gods offended, destroyed it with lightning. Here is a complete jumble of the ancient mythology. The 4,800 are the 8 cycles before Christ. Their architect is the megalistor, or the name of God made into the giant, and is X al-Hua, Wa, the self-existent X. The tower is the exact model of the Tower of Babel, as given in our old histories. After its destruction, it was dedicated to Quetzalcoatl, the god of the air. This is Saka, or Indra, whom we found crucified in Nepal. The Mexicans chanted word Hulula es, which belonged to no Mexican dialect, to the honor of their gods. This is evidently the Alleluia of the Greeks and Hebrews, and the Uyalu of the Irish. It is said that after the deluge, sacrificing commenced. The person who answers to Noah entered an ark with 6 others, and that soon after the deluge his descendants built the Tower of Tulan, Cholula, Cholula, Mexico, partly to see what was going on in heaven, and partly for fear of another deluge. But it was destroyed by thunder and lightning. Now again, it's saying here, remember, the person who answers to Noah, right? Noah from the Bible, that after the deluge, his descendants built the Tower of Tulan in Cholula, partly to see what is going on in heaven, and partly for fear of another deluge. But it was destroyed by thunder and lightning. The story of sending birds out of the ark, the confusion and dispersion of tribes in the same and general character with that of the Bible. His Lordship says, in attempting to explain how the Indians could have become acquainted with events of such remote antiquity, coupled with the foundation of the earliest monarchies, it would be absurd to suppose that their annals and native traditions extended backward to a period unknown to Egyptian, Persian, Greek, or Sanskrit history. Observed as it may be to suppose this, their hieroglyphic annals evidently do thus extend backwards. Alright, so he just said, even though it may be crazy, or as he says, absurd, to suppose that these annals are older and unknown to Egyptian, Persian, and Greek Sanskrit history, like older than those, it would be absurd, but it's evidently, it does extend backwards. Alright, these hieroglyphic annals of Mexico. His Lordship says the difficulty of comprehending the plan of the Tower of Belus given by Herodotus vanishes on inspecting the plans of the Mexican temples. The turrets in the Great Temple, described in page 380, were 360 in number, up to the temple Cholula, where 120 gradas, the brick base of the tower, so that says 126 stairs, the brick base of the Tower of Cholula, which remains and was built in order to escape another flood, if should come, in 1800 feet in circumference. It is said to have been destroyed by a stone from heaven, a stone from heaven meteor Dracan. It is pyramidal. Humboldt says it is hollow. I have little doubt that the word Cho has been XL equals 650, a monogram, which it may be remembered is found in the oldest catacombs of Rome. Teocalli, or Kaji, is the name of the temple of Cholula. This is said to be the house of Teocalli. This is evidently Teo, or God, Kali. Kali. House of God is precisely the Hebrew style. The word Cholula is thought by Lord Kingsborough to be a corruption of the word Jerusalem. We read that Cholula was a holy city as well, considered by the natives a holy city, and now Lord Kingsborough said it's a corruption of the word Jerusalem. He thinks the same of a place called Churula, but I suspect that they were identical. At Cholula is the very large temple with the very celebrated pyramid, which is said to be a very close imitation of the temple of Belus, or Tower of Babel. Again, in Cholula is a very large temple with the very celebrated pyramid, which is said to be a very close imitation of the temple of Belus, the Tower of Babel, the true old world. A room in one of the pyramids of Cholula had its ceiling formed like the temple of Comilmar, of overhanging stones. In volume 21 of the Classical Journal will be found some interesting remarks of Mr. Favors on the close similarity between the pyramid of the mountain Cholula of the Mexicans and the Tower of Belus. That one is a copy of the other, or that they are both taken from some common mythos, cannot possibly be doubted. Alright? Cannot be doubted which one is the duplicate. How much more correlation of different things in this part of the world that correlate to old world stories and monuments do we have to put together until we start seeing clearer. Alright? Again, it cannot possibly be doubted that these are a copy of the other, or that they are both taken from the same common mythos. This mountain in Cholula, pyramid mountain in Cholula, bigger than the pyramids of Egypt. In Cholula, this pyramid is the representation and exact copy of the Tower of Belus, described by Herodotus, right? That one is a copy of the other, right? This being premised, I would ask my reader whether he can doubt a moment that the well-known deity Omorka of the Chaldeans is the Hom Eyoka of the Mexicans. Thus, we have not only the mythos of the Greeks and Bacchus, of Christianity, of Judaism, of Tartary, and of North and South India in Mexico, but we have the very oldest mythos of Babylon. How came this mythos of Babylon in Mexico? The Great Pyramid of Cholula, also known as Tlachihualtepelt, for made by hand mountain, is a huge complex located in Cholula, Puebla, Mexico. It is the largest archaeological site of a pyramid temple in the New World, as well as the largest pyramid known to exist in the world today. Again, this is the largest pyramid known to exist in the world today. The pyramid stands 55 meters, 150 feet above the surrounding plain. In its final form, it measured 450 meters, about 1,480 feet. The pyramid is a temple that traditionally has been viewed as having been dedicated to the god Quetzalcoatl. There we go again, feathered serpent. All right. The architectural style of the building was linked closely to that of Teotihuacan in the Valley of Mexico. So we're going to read that with Alexander de Humboldt's book. He's going to let you know that it was almost a replica of what was in Teotihuacan before it was destroyed. This here history. The Great Pyramid was an important religious and mythical center in pre-Hispanic times. Important, very important, religious and mythical. All right, over a period of 1,000 years prior to the Spanish conquest, consecutive construction phases gradually built up the bulk of the pyramid until it became the largest in Mexico by volume. Says here classic, the temple pyramid complex was built in 4 stages, starting from the 3rd century BC through 9th century AD. We don't know that. They don't know this. They're making all this up. It could have been built all at once. To the deity Quetzalcoatl. It has base of 450 by 450 meters and a height of 66 meters, 217 feet. According to the Guinness Book of Records, it is in fact the largest pyramid as well as the largest monument ever constructed anywhere in the world. All right, with a total volume estimated at over 4.445 million cubic meters, even larger than that of the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt, which is about 2.5 million cubic meters. All right, do you want the numbers? Here they are. All right, what is the largest monument ever constructed anywhere in the world? It's this pyramid right here, the Pyramid of Cholula in Mexico. All right, and in the Old Testament of Torah, what was the largest monument ever constructed anywhere in the world by man? Tell me. You know what it was, the Tower of Babel, right? However, the Great Pyramid of Giza is higher at 138.8 meters, 455 feet. But we don't care about that. You know why? Because we got the Pyramid of La Danta, El Mirador. It's larger and it's taller. I'm sorry, it's taller than the one in Giza. So we got that too. Oh, we're gonna do a video about that too. Don't worry. The ceramics of Cholula were closely linked to those of Teotihuacan, and both sides appeared to decline simultaneously. The post-classic Aztecs believed that Hawah built the Great Pyramid of Cholula, and you're gonna see that this Hawah was a giant. All right. It says Cholula is one of the seven giants in the Aztec mythology who escaped the flood by ascending the mountain of Tlaloc. Ascending a mountain or ascending a tree. Remember when our mountains were trees? In the terrestrial paradise. Are we talking about Mount Roraima? Terrestrial paradise. And after was built the Great Pyramid of Cholula. Alright, so we're gonna get into this journal right here, this scholarly quarterly review. Is called the Foreign Quarterly Review, and this is basically a journal that I was looking for. I kept seeing a reference in a lot of books I was reading as a source. It's right now it's in the Harvard University collection. They're the ones who have most of the collections. There's over 50 volumes, I believe. This is in volume 18 that I'm gonna read from. All right, so it was hard to find because all I knew was that it was in the Foreign Quarterly Review, and I had to find out what volume it was in and what page and all that, and I was able to find it. And I just wanted to show you guys. This is a little preview. We're gonna get really heavy into this journal in this particular article about an exploration in Palenque in Mexico, and it just so happens to mention a little bit of Cholula and what we're talking about. So I wanted to show you that. Okay. So again, the Foreign Quarterly Review, volume 18, and this was written in 1837.
These facts being admitted or established, the question is, do the monuments of New Spain, as displayed in the illustrations of the works under review, correspond with three unvarying and identifying characteristics? Our reply is yes, they correspond entirely. Some of the pyramids, as we have said, are larger than those of Egypt. Some of them are different in their model, having somewhat of an Indian character, bearing strong affinity to pyramidal temples still extant in Japan. And it says, see the works of Sir Thomas Raffles for that. The Pyramid of Cholula exhibits a most singular identity with the model of the temples of Belus. Okay, so again, the Pyramid of Cholula exhibits a most singularly identity with the model of the temples of Belus. Belus Jupiter, Bel, Tower of Babel, described by Herodotus, and which by many scholars has been considered to be the scriptural Tower of Babel. Alright. It consists of the 8 graduated square towers, each rising above the other, and terminating in a topmost sanctuary, dedicated apparently to the same solar god, but there are more singular analogies between the forms of some of the pyramids of New Spain and some of the most ancient pyramids of Egypt.
Alright, so real quick, let's just get into the whole story in case you don't know it, right? A lot of people, haven't gone across the Torah or heard the Bible stories, right? So it says here, the Tower of Babel, as told in Genesis 11:19, is an origin myth meant to explain why the world's people speak different languages. All right. According to the story, a united humanity in the generations following the Great Flood. All right. We just heard of the Great Inundation in the Aztec legend, speaking a single language and migrating eastward, comes to the land of Shinar. There they agree to build a city and a tower tall enough to reach heaven. All right. Tall enough to reach heaven. Again, in the Aztec legend, the gods beheld with wrath because the edifice was to reach the clouds. All right. So it says that in the Tower of Babel, the people agreed to build a city. The tower was tall enough to reach heaven or the clouds, right? God observing their city, or the gods, right? And the tower confounded their speech so that they can no longer understand each other and scattered them around the world. All right, so we're still on the Wikipedia page talking about the Tower of Babel, right? So it says that in comparable myths, there's a Sumerian and Assyrian parallel. And if you know the stories of Enki, and you know all that, right? The Sumerian gods, we're done with that, right? We grew up with this stuff. I know that they had this in their myth. I already knew that. All right, but look what it points out here. It says Mexico. Now, we're still in the Wikipedia page for the Tower of Babel, right? It says various traditions similar to that of the Tower of Babel are found in Central America, right? So not just one place, but throughout Central America. Some writers connected the Great Pyramid of Cholula to the Tower of Babel. Some writers, look, it says who with a question mark. I'm going to show you who, okay? I'm going to show you who. The Dominican friar Diego Duran. All right, 1537 and 1588, we're going to go into Diego Duran's handwritten account. I got the Spanish original book. We're going to translate it today in this video, so don't go anywhere. Reported hearing an account about the pyramid from a 100-year-old priest at Cholula. All right, we're going to get into that. I'm not going to read that right now. All right, so it says another story attributed by the native historian Fernando de Alva Cortez, Ixtlilxóatl, from 1565 to 1648 to the ancient Toltecs, states that after men had multiplied following a great deluge, again another deluge, they erected a tall sacuali or tower to preserve themselves in the event of a second deluge. However, their languages were confounded and they went to separate parts of the earth. Again, here it says that in the Bible, the phrase Tower of Babel, etymology, right, does not appear in the Bible. It is always the city or a tower. All right, a tower, just like we just read in the Toltec story, a tower. All right, so now we're in this book. All right, we got a little bit of this in the Hebrew videos, I believe, part 4 or 5. And if you don't know, the book is called Historia de las Indias de Nueva España. So the history of the Indies of New Spain would be in English, and of the firm land, or tierra firme. And this is written by Padre Fray Diego Duran, or the Friar Fray Diego Duran, which is a primary source for this time. He was here during the conquest, the colonization, the invasion. All right, first-hand accounts. He talked to the Indians. All right, I showed who he was more in the other videos, the Hebrew videos, so go check it out. All right, but again, we're back in this book because something in here I found that's relating to what we're talking about in this book. All right, we're talking about Cholula, and we're talking about the Tower of Babel. All right, so let's see what the Indians there say about this pyramid in this place. All right, so we're going to go to this part of the book. It's on page, I believe, 5 or 6. We're in the beginning on chapter 1. And we're going to, what we're going to do, because this is in Spanish, right? All right, so I'm going to read this out and translate it to you. I hope you guys trust my translating. If not, you can verify it. I'll read it out in Spanish first. And you can read it out yourself here. Take a screenshot. Go anywhere else to any professor and see if I'm saying what I'm saying is correct. All right, so I'm going to start reading. And he says, basically, Duran. All right, so basically, he's in Cholula. He's going to tell you he's in Cholula. And he's going to be talking to an elder there. We're talking about an indigenous elder who's over 100 years old. All right, so let's read. It says, ¿Y por qué no dejemos nada por contar? So let's not leave anything out. I want to begin reading from the sacred scripture because, in my opinion, I am forced to. And I want to get to the topic right from the beginning, the first chapter of Genesis. And it says, in the beginning, God created the heaven and earth. He began to tell me, an old natural of Cholula, of 100 years old, that from an old age, he was inclined towards the earth, Asas, in his old learned ways, in which I begged him to enlighten me with a few things so I can put in my work. He asked me, so what do you want me to talk about? So I asked him from the beginning of the world and of what his indigenous generation has touched and had news of, in which he responded, grab a pen or a tint that says tint, right? Or write it down in a paper, because you're not going to be able to perceive everything I'm going to tell you, lo que yo te diré. In which it began in this way. We got a story, right? This is books written in 1500. We got a story, right, from Diego Duran, first-hand account, He was talking to an elder where? In Cholula. And his local legend there in Cholula regarding the pyramids as there, he knows, right? He told him straight up what? They built the tower. He hasn't read the Bible. This isn't his story. You can find these in the codices. You can find these stories in the codices before any Christianity, before any Bibles came over, because this was the original story. All right, so I just wanted to show you that. All right, this was just a little part of this book. We're gonna get into this book a lot in our Hebrew series. All right, and a lot in this series as well. All right, so again, this was Diego Duran, History of New Spain. I have the Indies of New Spain. This is written in the 1500s. He has an account from an elder, an indigenous elder from Cholula, of the story of the Tower of Babel and giants building it. All right. All right. Just wanted to go ahead and just read from this book. It's called Fingerprints of the Gods by Graham Hancock. Very popular book, well, at least to me and to a lot of people, actually. This is one of my favorite books. I had it, I have the hard copies since way back, I don't know, like 2001, 2002. And, it opened my eyes a lot when I read this book back then. And, I read so much, I forgot what was in it, until now I'm being able to put all this together. And it says the evidence of Earth's lost civilizations, all right? So, Fingerprints of the Gods, right? And Fingerprints of the Gods right here. And we're going to go to chapter 15, which is called the Mexican Babel, all right? So you see, these are not my theories. And we're not saying this is maybe the exact Tower of Babel. Who knows, right? It could be, might not be, but what I'm telling you is look at the information that exists, the history, all the correlation, and you put it together, right? All right, so again, down a little further down, it says Diego de Duran, right? We just read his book, right? The original source. I had to do it. I know I could have just came to this, but then it's not the same, right? If I don't show you the original Spanish written account in his words, right? Diego Duran's words. So it says here, according to Graham Hancock, a conscientious and courageous collector of indigenous traditions, was yet another Franciscan who fought to recover the lost knowledge of the past. He visited Cholula in AD 1585, a time of rapid and catastrophic change. There he interviewed a venerated elder of the town, a venerated elder, your ancestor, said to have been more than 100 years old, who told him this story about the making of the great cigarette. In the beginning, before the light of the sun had been created, this place, Cholula, was in obscurity and darkness. All was a plain without hill or elevation, encircled in every part by water, without tree or created thing. Immediately after the light and the sun arose in the east, there appeared gigantic men of deformed stature, who possessed the land. Enamored of the light and beauty of the sun, they determined to build a tower so high that its summit should reach the sky. Having collected materials for the purpose, they found very adhesive clay and bitumen, with which they speedily commenced to build the tower, or bricks, right? And having reared it to greatest possible altitude, so that it reached the sky, the Lord of Heavens, enraged, said to the inhabitants of the sky, "Have you observed how they of the earth have built it high and haughty tower to mount hither, being enamored of the light of the sun and his beauty? Come and confound them, because it is not right that they of the earth, living in the flesh, should mingle with us." Immediately the inhabitants of the sky sallied forth like flashes of lightning. They destroyed the edifice and divided and scattered its builders to all parts of the earth. All right, so you see that. This is, again, we're not reading from the Bible. This is a story from an elder in Cholula. All right, so we're saying that it got destroyed, so it was a little higher. It was taller, right? This place was taller. All right. It was this story, almost but not quite the biblical account of the Tower of Babel, which was itself a reworking of a far older Mesopotamian tradition that had brought me to Cholula. Mexico's hiding the world's largest pyramid. In the city of Cholula in central Mexico, there stands a hill with a giant church on top, which hides a man-made pyramid filled with secrets. William Connor, all right, wrote this. Here's a picture of the church on top. It says, Mexico City in 1519, Hernan Cortez and his conquistadors arrived in Cholula, one of the largest cities in central Mexico, roughly 50 miles southeast from modern-day Mexico City. Its tens of thousands of residents sat in the shadows of the 17,000-foot Popocatepetl Volcano. It had a temple featuring more stairs, claimed one Spaniard, than the main pyramid in Tenochtitlan. The Spanish tore it down. All right, what did they do? So what you see here today is not all of it. They tore it down and rebuilt Cholula in the same fashion they did across Mexico, replacing demon worshiping sites with Catholic ones. All right, so they tore down whatever was on top of there and built their church. So was that going even higher? All right, that also meant a hermit's shrine on top of a large hill called Tlachihualtepelt had to go. All right, it had to go. There was already a shrine there. It had to go, but the hill itself was in fact no hill. Its name translates to man-made mountain, and inside it was the largest pyramid remaining in the Americas, and by some estimates the largest monument ever constructed by man. But its secrets as one of the most important religious sites in Mesoamerica, one of the most religious sites in Mesoamerica, would remain hidden for 400 years and is still being uncovered today. And that's what we're doing, people. We're uncovering this today. All right, so now we're in this book. All right, this is a very popular book written by a very popular scholar in these times, right, when they were creating history, right? So it says here, researches concerning the institutions and monuments of the ancient inhabitants of America. All right, so this was written originally in French by Alexander de Humboldt. All right, if you're a historian, you know who this guy is. All right, very prestigious scholar, respected, in his time, and still used as a source many times. So before we read the book, who was Alexander de Humboldt? All right, if you don't know, right? It says, during his lifetime, Humboldt became one of the most famous men in Europe. Academies, both native and foreign, were eager to elect him to their membership. All right, so academies wanted him. The first being the American Philosophical Society in Philadelphia, which he visited at the tail end of his travel through the Americas. He was elected to the Prussian Academy of Sciences in 1805. Over the years, other learned societies in the U.S. elected him a member, including the American Antiquarian Society in Worcester, Mass. in 1816, the New York Historical Society in 1820, a foreign honorary member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences in 1822, the American Ethnological Society in 1843, and the American Geographical and Statistical Society in New York in 1856. He was elected a foreign member of the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences in 1810. The Royal Society, whose president, Sir Joseph Banks, had aided Humboldt as a young man, now welcomed him as a foreign member. All right, so are we talking about pseudo here? Are we talking about scholarly? All right, he was like they were recruiting him. He was like the Jordan in his game. All right, they were recruiting him. All these societies, right? Whatever they are, secret society, Freemasonic, whatever. All right, what I'm trying to show you is that this dude was not just writing some bullshit. All right, he's gonna write what he thinks of what he saw in Cholula. All right, so you ready for that? Let's go. All right, so we're all the way in page 81 of this book. It says here, Pyramid of Cholula, Plate 7. Among those swarms of nations, which from the 7th to the 12th century of the Christian era successively inhabited the country of Mexico, 5 are enumerated: the Toltecs, the Sisimex, the Acolhuans, the Tlaxcaltecas, and the Aztecs, who, notwithstanding their political division, spoke the same language, followed the same worship, and built pyramidal edifices which they regarded as teocalis, or the houses of God. That is to say, the houses of their gods. All right. These edifices were all of the same form, though of very different dimensions. They were pyramids with several terraces, and the sides of which stood exactly in the direction of the meridian and the parallel of the place. The teocalli was raised in the midst of a square and walled enclosure which somewhat like the, and it says here Greek word, of the Greeks, contained gardens, fountains, the dwellings of the priest, and sometimes arsenals, with each house of a Mexican divinity, like the ancient temple of Baal, Berif. Again, like the ancient temple of Baal. Alright? Burnt by Abimelech, was a strong place. A great staircase led to the top of the truncated pyramid, and on the summit of the platform were one of two chapels, built like towers, which contained the colossal idols of the divinity to whom the teocalli was dedicated. All right, again, perspective, people. We're talking about the pyramid of Cholula, Humboldt. All right, first-hand account. He's there. He's telling you what he's seeing. All right, he's letting you know when he climbed all the way to the top, there's a temple up there already, not a church. We see a church today. That's because they maybe made it look like a church, or they turned it into their church, but there was already a temple there, right? Built like, it says, two chapels built like towers which contained the colossal idols. It had idols, all right? This part of the edifice must be considered as the most consecrated place, like the, or rather the, and it's Greek words right here, of the Grecian temples. It was there also that the priests kept up the sacred fire. From the peculiar construction of the edifice we have just described, the priest who offered the sacrifice was seen by a great mass of the people. At the same time, the procession of the Teopixki, ascending or descending the staircase of the pyramid, was beheld at a considerable distance. The inside of the edifice was the burial place of the kings and principal personages of Mexico. Now listen to this. Here we go. It is impossible to read the descriptions which Herodotus and Diodorus Siculus have left us of the temple of Jupiter Baal, Belus, Babel, without being struck with the resemblance of that Babylonian monument to the teocallis of Anahuac or Mexico. All right, again, Alexander the Humboldt, right? All those prestige societies. All right, he's letting you know that it is impossible to read the descriptions which Herodotus, right, and also scholars, right, from the ancient past, right, Greeks, all right, Diodorus, are they pseudo? Are they, you know, you decide. But he's letting you know that when Herodotus and Diodorus are describing the temple of Jupiter Belus in Babylon, because Herodotus went to Babylon, he saw it first-hand account, right? So he's describing it. So when Humboldt, since Humboldt knows the history, he's read Herodotus' books, he knows that when he goes to Mexico and sees the pyramid of Cholula, that it is impossible to ignore what he has read of Herodotus describing the temple of Jupiter and not see it in the pyramid of Cholula, all right? He says, without being struck with the resemblance of that Babylonian monument to the teocallis of Anahuac. All right, it's impossible, because if you know the writings of Herodotus, you know the description of the temple of Jupiter, and you go to the pyramid of Cholula, Mexico, you will see for yourself. Go do that. All right, do you want to do that? All right, so now we're going to get into the description of by Alexander Humboldt of the pyramid of Cholula. His personal description, it says here, the teocalli of Cholula has 4 stories, all of equal height. It appears to have been constructed exactly in the direction of the 4 cardinal points. But as the edges of the stories are not very distinct, it is difficult to ascertain their primitive direction. This pyramidal monument has a broader basis than that of any other edifice of the same kind in the old continent. Again, Humboldt is letting you know as well, right, that this is the largest pyramid, because he's saying this pyramidal monument has a broader base than that of any other edifice in the same kind in the old continent or on the other side, right? I measured it carefully and ascertained that its perpendicular height is only 50 meters, but that each side of its base is 439 meters in length, all right? Alexander the Humboldt, he went there and measured it himself, just in case you don't believe it, all right? This prestige scholar, he measured it himself. Torquemada computes its height at 77 meters, Betancourt at 65, and Clavijero at 61. Bernal Diaz del Castillo, a common soldier in the army of Cortes, amused himself by counting the steps of the staircase which led to the platform of the Teocalis. He found 114 in the great temple of Tenochtitlan, 117 in that of Texcoco, and 120 in that of Cholula. The basis of the pyramid of Cholula is twice as broad as that of Cheops. We're talking about the pyramid of Egypt and Giza, right? He's saying it's twice, is really 4 times bigger, but its height is very little more than that of the pyramid of Misernios. It's okay because we got La Danta, El Mirador, I believe in Guatemala, and that's the tallest in the world. On comparing the dimensions of the House of the Sun at Teotihuacan with those of the pyramid of Cholula, we see that the people who constructed these remarkable monuments intended to give them the same height, but with bases, the length of which should be in the proportion of 1 to 2. Then we're in the book Researches Concerning the Institutions and Monuments of the Ancient Inhabitants of America, right? This is volume 1, Alexander the Humboldt, famous historian here, and he tells us the great Teocalli of Cholula, called also the mountain of unbaked bricks, the mountain of unbaked bricks, Tlachihualtepec, had an altar on its top dedicated to Quetzalcoatl, the god of the air. Continuing, Humboldt says, recorded in a manuscript of Pedro de los Rios, a Dominican monk who in 1566 copied on the very spot all the hieroglyphical paintings he could procure before the great inundation, which took place 4,800 years after the creation of the world. The country of Anahuac was inhabited by giants, Soquichlicheke. All those who did not perish were transformed into fishes, save 7 who fled into caverns. When the waters subsided, one of these giants, Xelhua, surnamed the architect, went to Choloyan, where as a memorial of the mountain Tlaloc, which had served for an asylum to himself and his 6 brethren, he built an artificial hill in form of a pyramid. He ordered bricks to be made in the province of Tlamanalco at the foot of the Sierra of Cocot, and to convey them to Cholula, he placed a file of men who passed them from hand to hand. The gods beheld with wrath this edifice. Now listen to this. The gods beheld with wrath this edifice, the top of which was to reach the clouds. All right, so just like the story we read of the elder and Duran's, all right, and just like the story of Babel, God got mad because they were building the Tower of Babel, right? Or the gods, because it says, let us go down and confuse them. All right, so it says the gods in plural, right? Beheld with wrath this edifice, the top of which was to reach the clouds. Irritated at the daring attempt of Xelhua, they hurled fire on the pyramid. Fire! Did they send their dragon, their messengers, their angels? Numbers of the workmen perished, the work was discontinued, and the monument was afterwards dedicated to Quetzalcoatl, the god of the air. This history reminds us of those ancient traditions of the East, all right, which the Hebrews have recorded in their sacred books. All right, so these same traditions in Mexico, which Humboldt is verifying for you, all right, resemble a lot of the traditions in the East, which the Hebrews have recorded in their sacred books too. The Cholulans preserve a stone which, enveloped in a ball of fire, had fallen from the clouds on top of the pyramid. You hear that? This aerolite had the figure of a toad. Rios, to prove the high antiquity of this fable of Xelhua, observed that it was contained in a hymn which the Cholulans sung at their festivals dancing around the Teocalli, and that this hymn began with the words Tulanian, Lulu, Laes, which are words belonging to no dialect at present known in Mexico. Alright, so he's telling you, Humboldt, that this is old. They had this before anybody could come tell them any story of the Old Testament or any Bible or any Christian thing passed on to them, like most people say. Alright, they already had this in their hymns, in their songs. In every part of the globe on the ridge of the Cordilleras, as well as the isles of Samothrace and the Aegean Sea, fragments of primitive languages are preserved in religious rites. The size of the platform of the Pyramid of Cholula, on which I made a great number of astronomical observations, is 4,200 square meters. From it the eye ranges over a magnificent prospect. Popocatepetl, Iztaccíhuatl, the peak of Orizaba, and the Sierra de Tlaxcala, famous for the tempests which gather around its summit. Alright, so Humboldt's letting you know right from the top, he can see so much, it's very high, right? We view at the same time three mountains higher than Mount Blanc, two of which are still burning volcanoes. A small chapel surrounded with cypress and dedicated to the Virgin de los Remedios, cypress, cedars of God, has succeeded to the temple of the god of the air, or the Mexican Indra. You hear that? An ecclesiastic of the Indian race celebrates Mass every day on top of this antique monument. In the time of Cortés, Cholula was considered as a holy city. Again, Cholula was a holy city. Nowhere existed a greater number of teocalis, or pyramids, of priests and religious orders, tlamatcasque. No spot displayed greater magnificence in the celebration of public worship, or more austerity in the penances and fasts. So you hear Cholula was a very holy place when Cortés got there. Alright? No soldiers there, it was mostly priests there. Alright, so now we're at the good part, right? Why are we making this video, right? So let's hear again what Humboldt's gonna tell us. Alright, remember who Humboldt is, what book we're reading here, alright, and what we've learned, seen so far. Alright, so it says, again, in this book, researchers concerning the institutions and monuments of the ancient inhabitants of America. Alright, this is volume 1 by Alexander D. Humboldt. Now he says, we have above remarked the great similarity of construction between the Mexican teocalis and the temple of Baal, or Belus, at Babylon. Again, we've already remarked, we've already told you, right? We've already shown you how many similarities. Alright? This analogy had already struck Mr. Zoega, though he had been able to procure but very incomplete descriptions of the group of the pyramids of Teotihuacan. According to Herodotus, who visited Babylon and saw the temple of Belus. So listen, alright? Listen, man, picture this. I'm telling you straight up. I'm gonna say it. So picture Herodotus coming to Mexico and seeing the pyramid of Cholula, when they're telling you that according to Herodotus, who visited Babylon and saw the temple of Belus. Alright? Let's just go there, alright? Let's picture this. This pyramidal monument had 8 stories. It was a stadium high, and the breadth of its bases was equal to its height. The outer wall which surrounded it was 2 stadia square. A common Olympic stadium was 183 meters. The Egyptian stadium was only 98. The pyramid was built of brick and asphaltum. Alright, remember. Now this is the description of the Tower of Belus, or Babel, seen by Herodotus. Alright, he said it's made out of what? Brick. What is the pyramid of Cholula? A brick mountain, right? Built of brick. What is it? Mud. Mud brick and asphaltum. A temple was erected on its top, and it also had a temple on its top, just like Cholula, and another at its base. The first, according to Herodotus, was without statues. It contained only a table of gold and a bed on which reposed a female chosen by the god Belus. Diodorus Siculus, on the other hand, asserts that the upper temple contained an altar and 3 statues or idols, to which, according to notions taken from the worship of the Greeks, he gave the names of Jupiter, Juno, and Rhea. But neither of these statues nor any part of the monument existed in the time of Diodorus and Strabo. In the Mexican teocalis, as in the temple of Belus, the lower naos was distinguished from the temple on the platform of the pyramid. The same distinction is clearly pointed out in the letters of Cortés. Alright, you heard that, right? And in the history of the conquest written by Bernal Diaz, who dwelt several months in the palace of the king Axayacatl, and consequently opposite the Teocalli, of Huitzilopochtli. Diodorus relates that the Babylonian temple served as an observatory to the Chaldeans. It must be admitted, says he, that this building was of extraordinary height, in that here the Chaldeans made their observations on the stars, the rising and setting of which might be exactly perceived on account of the elevation of the edifice. The Mexican priest Teopixqui made observations also on the stars from the summit of the Teocalis, the pyramid of Cholula. They did the same thing, and announced to the people by the sound of the horn, a horn. Who also does that? Horn. Hebrews, right?